My cousin Tyler was holding court at the family barbecue, telling everyone about his new job in IT security while making jokes about how I was still serving coffee at 28 years old. I'm a barista, and yeah, it's not glamorous, but it pays my bills while I figure things out. Tyler had just launched into another story about real careers versus dead-end service jobs when his father, my Uncle Marcus, asked me to pass him a beer. As I handed it to him, he noticed the faded tattoo on my wrist. 4 numbers and 2 letters that most people wouldn't recognize. But Uncle Marcus wasn't most people. He was a retired Navy SEAL with 22 years of service. His eyes locked on my tattoo, then snapped up to my face with an expression I'd never seen before. "What's your call sign?" he asked, his voice cutting through Tyler's monologue. The entire barbecue went quiet. Tyler was smirking, probably thinking this was another opportunity to embarrass me. But when I answered, Uncle Marcus's face went pale. Then he turned to Tyler with a look that could freeze blood and said 3 words that changed everything. "Apologize now." The silence that followed Uncle Marcus's command was absolute. 20 family members frozen mid-conversation, holding paper plates and beer bottles, staring at the scene unfolding by the grill. Tyler's smirk had vanished, replaced by confusion as he looked between his father and me, trying to understand what had just happened. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Tyler said. "Why would I apologize to Maya? I was just joking around." "You weren't joking," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular quality that comes from decades of command experience. "You were belittling your cousin in front of the entire family. You called her work meaningless. You implied she was a failure, and you did it while having absolutely no idea who you were talking to." I felt my face flush. This was not how I wanted this conversation to happen. I'd kept my military service private for 6 years, ever since I'd separated from the Marines. I had my reasons, good reasons, for not talking about it. But now Uncle Marcus was staring at my wrist tattoo like it was a classified document, and those reasons were about to become irrelevant. "Uncle Marcus," I started, but he held up a hand. "Ghost 7-2, he said, his eyes still locked on mine. "That was your call sign?" I nodded, feeling the weight of every eye at the barbecue on me. "How long were you in?" 6 years. Marines, Force Reconnaissance." The gasps from my family were audible. My mother actually dropped her plate. My aunt, Tyler's mother, looked like she might faint. And Tyler looked like someone had just told him the earth was flat and he'd been walking around on a globe this whole time. "Force Recon," Marcus repeated, and there was something in his voice that I recognized. Respect. Recognition. The acknowledgement that passes between people who've been in the shit together, even if they served in different branches and never met in theater. "How many deployments?" 3. Afghanistan twice, classified once. "Combat?" "Yes, sir." Marcus nodded slowly, then turned back to Tyler. "Your cousin, who you just spent 20 minutes mocking in front of the entire family, is a Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance veteran with 3 combat deployments. Force Recon is one of the most elite units in the U.S. military. They're the Marines' Special Operations Capable Unit. They go in before everyone else, gather intelligence, direct airstrikes, and conduct deep reconnaissance in hostile territory. Your cousin did things in combat that most people can't even imagine, and she did them for 6 years while you were getting your bachelor's degree in information technology." Tyler's face had gone from confused to pale to red. I didn't know." "That's the point. You didn't know. You saw someone working as a barista and made assumptions about their worth, their capabilities, their life choices. You didn't bother to ask why a 28-year-old might be working a service job. You just judged." "Maya never told anyone she was in the military," Tyler said defensively. "How was I supposed to know?" "You weren't supposed to know," Marcus said, "but you were supposed to respect her anyway. You don't need to know someone's resume to treat them with basic human decency." What Uncle Marcus would reveal next about the meaning of my call sign would explain not just why I'd kept my service hidden, but why seeing that tattoo had affected him so deeply. And the story behind those numbers and letters would silence Tyler's excuses forever. Marcus gestured to my wrist. "Can I?" he asked, and I held out my arm. He examined the tattoo closely, 4 numbers and 2 letters in simple black ink. 72-1309. "Go 72, he murmured. "July 2nd, 2013, 0900 hours. "You can read that?" my mother asked, stepping closer. "What does it mean?" Marcus looked at me, asking permission with his eyes. I nodded. If this was coming out, it might as well come out completely. "Call signs in special operations aren't random," Marcus explained to the gathered family. "They mean something. They commemorate something. Maya's call sign includes a date and a time. That's unusual unless the date marks a significant event. Maya, what happened on July 2nd, 2013 at 9 a.m.? I took a deep breath. I'd never told this story to my family. I'd barely told it to the VA therapist I'd seen for 2 years after I got out. But here, at a family barbecue, with my cousin's mockery hanging in the air and Uncle Marcus's understanding eyes on mine, I found myself ready to finally say it out loud. "I was part of a 4-person recon team in Helmand Province," I began. "We were doing advanced reconnaissance for a larger operation, gathering intelligence on Taliban positions. On July 2nd, we were in a compound doing surveillance when we got ambushed. IED at the entrance, small arms fire from 3 positions, RPG that took out our exit route. We were pinned down for 6 hours before reinforcements could reach us." The barbecue was so quiet, I could hear the cicadas in the trees. My father had tears in his eyes. My mother's hand was over her mouth. Our team leader was hit in the first 30 seconds, shrapnel from the IED. He was bleeding out, and we were taking fire from all sides. I was the medic on the team, so I did what I could, but we were in the shit, and I couldn't get him stable. He died at 9 a.m. exactly. I was holding pressure on his femoral artery, and I felt his pulse stop, and I looked at my watch, and it was 0900 hours. "Oh my God, Maya," my mother whispered. We held that position for 5 more hours. The other 2 members of my team were wounded. I kept them alive, kept returning fire, kept calling for air support and medevac. By the time the QRF got to us, I'd gone through all our ammunition and was down to my sidearm. When they pulled us out, they found 87 confirmed enemy casualties in the area, most of them from airstrikes I'd directed. Marcus was nodding, his jaw tight. "They gave you the call sign after that?" "Yeah, Ghost because I kept us alive when we should have died. 7-2 for the date, and the time, 0900, because that's when I learned what it really meant to be a Marine. When my team leader died, I became the ranking member. 23 years old, 3 months into my 2nd deployment, and suddenly I was in command of 2 wounded Marines in a hot LZ with no support. I made decisions that day that I still see in my sleep. "Did you get recognition for that?" my aunt asked quietly. "Navy Cross," I said. "2nd highest military decoration. I also got a Purple Heart for the shrapnel wounds I took, though those were minor. But the Navy Cross, that was for, as the citation said, extraordinary heroism in combat against an armed enemy, which is just military speak for didn't die when you probably should have." Tyler looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. His wife, Jennifer, who'd been standing next to him, had moved away, clearly embarrassed by association. "So when you've been spending the last 20 minutes telling Maya she needs to get a real career," Marcus said to Tyler, his voice ice cold, "you were talking to a decorated combat veteran who has more courage in her pinky finger than you'll have in your entire life. When you mocked her for serving coffee, you were mocking someone who served her country in one of the most dangerous jobs in the military. And when you called her a loser for working a service job at 28, you were judging someone who's dealing with PTSD, survivor's guilt, and the challenge of reintegrating into civilian life after 6 years of war." I didn't know, Tyler said again, and this time his voice was small. You should have asked, I said, finding my own voice. Before you spent 20 minutes using me as your punching bag to make yourself feel important, you should have asked what I've been doing with my life. Or better yet, you shouldn't have used anyone as your punching bag at all. Why didn't you tell anyone? My mother asked, and there was hurt in her voice. 6 years in the military, combat deployments, nearly dying, and you never said a word. We thought you were doing administrative work on a base somewhere. Because I didn't want this, I gestured at the stunned faces around me. I didn't want to be Maya the war hero or Maya the combat veteran. I wanted to be just Maya. When I got out, I was so tired of being defined by the worst things I'd seen and done. I wanted to do something simple, something that didn't require me to make life or death decisions. I wanted to steam milk and pull espresso shots and talk to customers about their day. Is it a prestigious career? No. But it's mine, and it's peaceful, and that's what I needed. What I would tell my family next about why I'd chosen silence over recognition would reveal the cost of military service that goes beyond physical wounds, and Uncle Marcus's response would show that he understood that cost in a way only another veteran could. When I came home, I continued, and my voice was shaking now, I had nightmares every night, still do sometimes. I'd wake up reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. I'd hear a car backfire and drop to the ground. I couldn't be in crowds because I was always scanning for threats. The VA put me in therapy, gave me medications, taught me coping strategies, and slowly, very slowly, I started to feel human again, instead of like a weapon waiting to be deployed. My father was openly crying now. My mother looked devastated. Even my cousins who'd been laughing at Tyler's jokes earlier looked stricken. The barista job was part of my therapy, I explained. My counselor suggested I find work that was the opposite of military service, something with routine, something with human interaction that wasn't life-threatening, something where the stakes were, did I make this latte right, instead of, did I call in that airstrike on the correct coordinates? So I got a job at a coffee shop, and it's been good for me. It's been healing. But you could do so much more, my aunt said, and I could tell she meant it kindly. With your experience, your leadership, you could work in security or law enforcement or— I don't want to, I said firmly. I spent 6 years being hypervigilant, being ready to kill or be killed at any moment. I'm done with that life. Maybe someday I'll want something different, but right now making coffee is exactly what I need to be doing. And that's okay. Marcus stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. It was unexpected and fierce, the kind of embrace that only happens between people who understand something that can't be explained to civilians. You did good, kid, he said quietly, just for me. You served with honor, you survived, and you're taking care of yourself now. That's all that matters. Anyone who judges you for that doesn't understand what service costs. He released me and turned back to Tyler. So, are you going to apologize? Tyler looked at his feet, his face red with shame. I'm sorry, Maya. I was completely out of line. I had no idea what you'd been through, and even if I had known, I shouldn't have been making fun of your job. I was being an asshole, trying to make myself look good by putting you down, and I'm sorry. It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but it was genuine. I could see the mortification in his eyes, the understanding that he'd massively screwed up in front of everyone. Thank you, I said. And Tyler? This is why you don't judge people. You never know what they're carrying. You never know what they've survived. The person serving you coffee might be a combat veteran. The person bagging your groceries might have a PhD. The person cleaning offices might be putting themselves through medical school. Everyone has a story, and making assumptions about people based on their current job is ignorant and cruel. The barbecue resumed slowly after that, but the atmosphere had changed. People kept coming up to me, wanting to hear more, wanting to apologize for not knowing, wanting to tell me they were proud. It was overwhelming and uncomfortable, and exactly what I'd been trying to avoid by keeping my service private. But there was also something cathartic about it. I'd been carrying the weight of those 6 years alone for so long, and now my family knew. They knew why I sometimes got quiet at sudden loud noises. They knew why I didn't like fireworks. They knew why I'd turned down every job offer that involved security or law enforcement. They understood, or at least they were beginning to. What happened after the barbecue would teach Tyler a lesson about respect that went far beyond the apology he'd given, and the conversation I had with Uncle Marcus later that night would reveal that he'd known someone with my exact call sign, and the connection between us went deeper than I'd ever imagined. After most of the family had left, Marcus found me sitting on the back porch, away from the remaining stragglers. He sat down next to me without asking, 2 beers in hand. He offered me one, and I took it. "I knew someone with your call sign," he said after a long silence. I looked at him sharply. "That's impossible. Call signs are unique to the individual." "Not the exact sign, but Ghost 72. I knew a Marine who went by Ghost 72 Alpha. Different mission, different unit, but same date, same time. July 2nd, 2013, 0900. My heart stopped. What was his name? Gunnery Sergeant David Chen. He was part of the QRF that pulled you out. Chen, I whispered. He was the first one through the door when they reached us. He gave me his water because I'd given all of mine to my wounded teammates. He carried one of them out, personally while under fire. Marcus nodded. He came home from that deployment and couldn't shake it. He'd seen so many Marines die that year, and when he pulled your team out, when he saw that you'd kept 2 of them alive through 6 hours of combat, he said it restored something in him. Hope, maybe. Proof that sometimes the good guys win. He got the call sign Ghost 72 Alpha to honor what you did that day. Where is he now? Retired, like me, lives in Oregon, runs a veteran support program. We served together later, after Afghanistan. He's good people. I'd like to meet him someday, to thank him. I'll make it happen. He'd like that. He talks about you sometimes, about the young Marine who held a position for 6 hours and brought her team home alive. He didn't know your name, just your call sign. He'll be glad to know you're doing okay. We sat in silence for a while, watching the fireflies come out in the darkening yard. Why didn't you tell your family? Marcus asked. About your service? Honestly, because I didn't want to be defined by it. My whole identity for 6 years was Marine. Everything I did, everything I was, it was all tied to the Corps. When I got out, I wanted to be something else, someone else. Not a veteran, not a war hero, just me. And I didn't know how to be me, and also talk about the things I'd done. I get that, Marcus said. When I retired, I went through something similar. Everyone wanted to hear war stories, wanted me to be the tough SEAL guy at parties. But I was tired of being that guy. I wanted to be a dad, a husband, a regular person who worried about lawn care and property taxes instead of mission planning and kill counts. Did it work? Eventually. But I had to learn that you can acknowledge your service without being defined by it. The things we did, the things we survived, they're part of us. But they're not all of us. You can be a barista and a veteran. You can make coffee and also have a Navy Cross in your closet. They're not mutually exclusive. Tyler didn't see it that way. Tyler's an idiot, Marcus said bluntly. But maybe today taught him something about humility, about not judging people, about understanding that everyone's fighting battles you can't see. He was pretty humiliated. Good, he should be. Maybe next time he'll think twice before mocking someone's life choices. Marcus took a long drink of his beer. You know what the funny thing is? Tyler's always been intimidated by my service. Growing up, he heard stories about SEALs, saw my decorations, and he always felt like he could never measure up. So he tries to make himself feel important by putting other people down. It's insecurity masquerading as confidence. He's your son. Shouldn't you be defending him? I love my son. But love doesn't mean pretending he's not an ass when he's being an ass. He needed to learn this lesson, and frankly, I'm glad it happened now before he really hurt someone with his judgment. I think I hurt him pretty badly. You didn't hurt him. You educated him. There's a difference. And if his ego is a little bruised, well, that's the price of wisdom sometimes. We finished our beers as the last of the party sounds faded from inside the house. Eventually, Marcus stood to go back inside, but he paused at the door. For what it's worth, Maya, I'm proud of you. Not just for your service, though that's impressive as hell, but for having the strength to walk away when you needed to, for choosing healing over prestige, for finding a life that works for you instead of living up to other people's expectations. That takes more courage than most people have. After he went inside, I sat alone in the darkness, thinking about call signs and courage and the strange paths life takes. 6 years ago, I'd been a Marine holding a position against overwhelming odds, making split-second decisions that meant life or death. Now, I was a barista making lattes and learning to sleep through the night without nightmares. Both versions of me were real. Both versions of me had value. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to understand that I didn't have to choose between them. What I would discover in the weeks after the barbecue would prove that sharing my story, as uncomfortable as it had been, would open doors I'd never expected, and Tyler's journey from mockery to understanding would teach our entire family something about the invisible battles veterans fight long after they come home. The week after the barbecue, Tyler showed up at the coffee shop where I worked. I was in the middle of the morning rush, steam wand hissing, orders piling up on the screen, the usual controlled chaos of a Tuesday at 9 a.m. I saw him walk in and stand awkwardly by the door, clearly unsure if he should approach. I finished the drink I was making, handed it off, and gestured for him to come to the counter. "What can I get you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Just, a regular coffee. Black." He looked around the shop, taking in the chalkboard menu, the local art on the walls, the mismatched furniture that gave the place its character. "This is a nice place." "It is. Best coffee shop in the city, in my completely unbiased opinion." I poured his coffee and slid it across the counter. "On the house." "Maya, He stopped, struggling for words. I came to apologize again, properly this time, not with my dad standing over me making me do it. What I said at the barbecue was inexcusable. I was being a judgmental ass, and finding out about your service just made it worse, because it proved how little I actually knew about you. Tyler, we already did this. You apologized. It's fine. It's not fine, though. I've been thinking about it all week, about how I talk about people, how I judge people, and it's not just you. I do it all the time. I make assumptions about people based on their jobs, their education, their appearance, and I realized I learned that from my environment, I guess. My tech friends, we all do it. We act like we're better than people in service jobs, people without degrees, people who aren't in STEM fields, and it's toxic, and I'm done with it. A customer behind him cleared their throat, waiting to order. I held up a finger to Tyler. "Hold that thought." I took 3 more orders, made 4 drinks, and handled a complaint about the temperature of someone's latte before I could turn back to Tyler. He'd moved to a table near the counter and was still waiting. "Sorry," I said during a brief lull. "Rush hour." "Don't apologize. This is what I'm talking about. You're doing 3 jobs at once, dealing with demanding customers, maintaining quality under pressure. It's skilled work, and I called it meaningless. It's coffee, Tyler. Let's not overstate it. But it's not just coffee. You're managing inventory, operating expensive equipment, handling customer service, working as part of a team. Those are all skills, and you're doing it while managing PTSD and reintegrating into civilian life. That's not meaningless. That's survival." I studied him, trying to figure out if this was genuine growth or just guilt talking. "What do you want from me, Tyler?" I want to understand. I want to know more about what you went through, why you chose this job, what it's really like to be a veteran. Not because I'm nosy, but because I realized I don't know anything about military service, and I've been judging it anyway. Why the sudden interest in understanding? Because my dad hasn't looked at me the same since the barbecue. He's not angry, exactly, but he's disappointed, and that's worse. He said I was raised better than to judge people, and he was right. My mom's been upset, too. She keeps talking about how brave you are, how she wishes she'd known what you were going through. The whole family is treating me like I'm the guy who mocked a war hero at a barbecue. You are the guy who mocked a war hero at a barbecue. I know, and I deserve the judgment, but I want to be better. So I'm asking, will you help me understand? Not just your story, but what it's like for veterans coming home. What people like me should know. What I would tell Tyler about the reality of veteran reintegration would open his eyes to a crisis he'd never considered, and his response would surprise me enough that I'd agree to something that would change both our lives. You want to understand? I said during my break, sitting across from Tyler at the table. Here's what you should know. There are about 200,000 service members who transition to civilian life every year. A significant percentage of them struggle with employment, mental health, housing, and basic reintegration. And the hardest part isn't the big stuff, it's the small stuff. What do you mean? I mean that in the military, everything is structured. You wake up at the same time every day. Your meals are scheduled. Your tasks are assigned. Your uniform is laid out. Your purpose is clear. Then you get out, and suddenly you have to decide everything. What to wear, what to eat, where to work, who you are. It's overwhelming. Tyler was taking notes on his phone. I found it both annoying and oddly touching. Then there's the skills translation problem, I continued. I can navigate hostile territory, call in airstrikes, provide emergency combat medicine, and lead troops under fire. But none of that translates to civilian job requirements. I applied for over 40 jobs when I first got out. Only 3 called me back for interviews. They saw Force Reconnaissance Marine and had no idea what that meant or how it applied to marketing or sales or whatever they were hiring for. So you became a barista because no one would hire you for other things? Partly, but also because I needed something low stress while I worked through my PTSD. You don't understand what it's like to go from constant life or death situations to a world where the biggest emergency is running out of oat milk. It's jarring. Your brain doesn't adjust quickly. For months after I got out, I was still in combat mode. Hypervigilant, aggressive, paranoid. I needed a job where the stakes were low enough that I could relearn how to be a normal person. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. They see a veteran working a service job, and they think waste of training or couldn't cut it in the real world. They don't think person recovering from trauma or someone rebuilding their life one day at a time. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. What can people like me do? To help, I mean, or at least not make it worse. Don't judge. That's the big one. If you meet a veteran, don't assume you know their story. Don't ask if they killed anyone. Don't say, "Thank you for your service," unless you mean it. And even then, understand that some veterans find that phrase uncomfortable. Don't treat us like broken heroes or dangerous weapons. Just treat us like people. That's it? That's harder than you think. People have this image of veterans as either perfect patriotic heroes or damaged victims. We're neither. We're just people who did a job, and that job changed us, and now we're trying to figure out how to live with those changes. Tyler finished his coffee, which had long since gone cold. Would you be willing to talk to my company? We have a diversity and inclusion committee, and we've been discussing hiring practices for veterans. We have this idea that we should be hiring veterans for security or IT security roles, but I'm starting to think we're approaching it wrong. You probably are. Not every veteran wants to work in security. Some of us want to be accountants or teachers or graphic designers. The military isn't just infantry and combat arms. There are veterans with skills in logistics, communications, medicine, administration, engineering. The key is looking at what they actually did, not just that they served. Would you come talk to our team about that? About how to better recruit and support veteran employees? I hesitated. Public speaking about my service wasn't exactly my comfort zone, but Tyler seemed genuinely interested in learning, and if it could help other veterans get better opportunities, maybe it was worth the discomfort. I'll think about it, I said. 3 days later, I got a call from Uncle Marcus. Tyler told me about his conversation with you, about wanting to understand veterans better. Yeah, he showed up at my work. It was actually kind of nice. He seemed sincere. He is. He's been asking me questions, too. About my service, about transition, about what I wished people understood when I retired. I think the barbecue really shook him. He's trying to be better. That's good. There's something else, Marcus said. Remember I mentioned Gunny Chen, the Marine who gave you his water? Of course. I called him, told him I'd found Ghost 72. He wants to meet you if you're willing. He's coming to town next month for a veterans conference. I thought maybe we could all get dinner. My throat tightened. I'd thought about Gunny Chen so many times over the years. The face that appeared in the doorway when I'd thought we were done. The calm voice telling me we were going home. The strong hands that lifted my wounded teammate like he weighed nothing. I'd like that, I managed to say. Good, I'll set it up. And Maya? Tyler asked if he could come too, to the dinner. He wants to hear the story from Chen's perspective, understand what that rescue operation was like. Is that okay with you? I thought about it. Tyler at a dinner with veterans, listening to combat stories, trying to understand a world he'd never been part of. It could be awkward, it could be uncomfortable, but it could also be educational for all of us. Yeah, I said, that's okay. What would happen at that dinner would forge an unlikely alliance between Tyler and me, and the project we would start together would help dozens of veterans find meaningful work while teaching Tyler's company that hiring veterans was about more than just filling diversity quotas. The dinner was at a steakhouse downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting and leather booths that made conversation easy. Gunny Chen arrived first, and I knew him immediately despite the years and the gray in his hair. He had the bearing of a Marine, the way he carried himself, the alert eyes that took in everything about a room before committing to entering it. Go 7-2, he said, and his face broke into a smile. I've been calling you that for 6 years. It's good to finally know your name is Maya. We shook hands, then he pulled me into a hug that smelled like cigars and coffee and memories I'd tried to forget. You look good, he said, stepping back to look at me properly. Better than the last time I saw you anyway. Less blood, fewer holes. I laughed despite myself. Yeah, I've cleaned up. A bit since then. Marcus arrived with Tyler, who looked nervous. Chen assessed him with the same measuring look I remembered from that day in Hellman, the one that seemed to calculate threat levels and weakness points in a split second. You must be Marcus's son, Chen said, shaking Tyler's hand. Your dad says you're interested in learning about military service. Yes, sir. I made some mistakes recently, said some things I shouldn't have. I'm trying to educate myself so I don't make those mistakes again. Chen nodded approvingly. That's good. Admitting ignorance is the first step to wisdom, or so they tell me. I'm still working on the wisdom part. Over dinner, Chen told the story of the rescue operation from his perspective, how they'd received the distress call, how they'd scrambled the QRF, how they'd fought their way to our position through ambushes and IEDs. When we finally breached that compound, Chen said, his voice getting quiet, I expected to find bodies. 6 hours pinned down, that usually doesn't end well. But then I saw this young Marine, couldn't have been more than 23, 24, and she was covering 2 wounded teammates with her body, pistol in hand, covered in blood and dust. She looked up at me and said, Gunny, we're ready to go home now. I don't remember saying that, I admitted. You said it, then you passed out. We got you to the Bird, got you and your team to the field hospital. You had shrapnel wounds we hadn't even noticed because of all the blood. Combat medics said you'd lost enough blood that you should have been unconscious hours earlier, but you'd stayed alert through pure determination. Tyler was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. How did you do that? Stay conscious, I mean, when you'd lost that much blood? Honestly, I don't know. I remember being tired, so tired, but I couldn't let myself sleep because if I slept, I might not wake up to protect my teammates, so I didn't let myself sleep. That's not normal human capability, Chen said. That's something else. That's what separates good Marines from exceptional ones. You didn't just refuse to die. You refused to stop fighting. I had good training. Training helps. But what you did that day wasn't just training. It was character. What Chen would tell Tyler about the aftermath of that rescue would explain why veteran mental health was so critical, and his description of his own struggles after that deployment would show Tyler that even the strongest warriors carry invisible wounds. After we pulled Maya's team out, Chen continued, and his voice had changed, become heavier. I went back to base and I couldn't shake it. I kept thinking about how close we'd come to being too late, how if we'd been delayed by even 30 minutes, we probably would have found 3 KIA instead of 3 survivors. It haunted me. You got the ghost call sign because of that day? Tyler asked. Yeah, Go 72 Alpha, Alpha for the rescue team. I took it because I wanted to remember that sometimes we get there in time, sometimes the good guys win, but I also wanted to remember the cost, what it takes to hold a position for 6 hours, what it means to watch your team leader die and keep fighting anyway. Chen looked at me. I had nightmares about that day for 2 years. I'd dreamed that we didn't make it in time, that I'd breached the door and found 3 dead Marines instead of 3 living ones. I'd wake up in a panic, and my wife would have to calm me down, remind me that you survived, that we got you out. I didn't know that, I said quietly. Most people don't know how much rescuers carry. They think once the rescue is done, we just move on. But you don't forget the faces of people you pulled out of hell. You don't forget wondering if you'd been fast enough, good enough, strong enough. Even when you succeed, you carry the weight of what could have gone wrong. Tyler was taking this in, his expression serious. Is that why you started the Veterans Support Program in Oregon? Partly. After I retired, I realized a lot of us were struggling in silence. We'd done the impossible in combat, but we couldn't figure out how to go to the grocery store without having a panic attack. We'd led troops under fire, but we couldn't hold down civilian jobs. We'd saved lives, but we couldn't save ourselves from our own memories. What does your program do? We help veterans transition, job training, mental health support, housing assistance, community building. But mostly we give them a place where they don't have to explain themselves, where everyone understands why loud noises are hard, why crowds are overwhelming, why sometimes you just need to sit in silence with people who get it. That's what I needed when I got out, I said. A place where I didn't have to perform, being okay, where I could just be broken for a while and know that was acceptable. Did you find that? Chen asked. Eventually, therapy helped. The VA connected me with other veterans, and the coffee shop, weirdly enough. My coworkers knew I was a veteran, and they didn't make a big deal about it. When I had a bad day, they covered for me. When I needed to take a break because I was getting overwhelmed, they understood. That acceptance was healing. Tyler spoke up. That's what I want to create at my company, that kind of understanding environment. But I don't know how. I don't know what veterans need, what accommodations help, how to interview someone whose experience is so different from mine. Chen pulled out a business card and handed it to Tyler. That's my program's website. We have resources for employers, training materials, consultation services, success stories. If you're serious about hiring veterans and supporting them properly, we can help. I am serious. I want to do this right. Then here's where you start, Chen said. Stop thinking about veterans as a charitable hiring initiative. Start thinking about us as skilled workers who bring unique value, leadership under pressure, adaptability, problem solving, teamwork, ability to perform under stress. Those are skills every company needs. The military just happens to train them more intensively than any civilian employer can. And the challenges? Tyler asked. The PTSD, the adjustment issues, the medical needs? Those are real, but they're manageable with the right support. Flexible scheduling for medical appointments, understanding about mental health days, training for managers on how to work with veteran employees. It's not complicated, it's just different from what most companies are used to. I watched Tyler taking notes, asking intelligent questions, genuinely trying to understand. This was so different from the man who'd mocked me at the barbecue, that Tyler had been performing confidence to cover insecurity. This Tyler was admitting ignorance and seeking knowledge. It was growth in real time. What Tyler would propose at the end of that dinner would surprise all of us, and the program we would build together over the next 6 months would become a model for veteran hiring that other companies across the country would adopt. As we were finishing dessert, Tyler set down his fork and looked at the three of us. I have an idea, and it might be ambitious, but hear me out. What if my company partnered with Chen's program to create a veteran hiring pipeline? Not just posting jobs and hoping veterans apply, but actually recruiting from the program, providing training and support, creating a pathway from military service to meaningful civilian work? Chen leaned back, considering. That's interesting. What would that look like specifically? I'm thinking we identify roles that match military skills, not just security, but project management, logistics, IT, communications, operations. Then we work with your program to find veterans with those skills and provide them with transition training specific to our company. Paid training with a guaranteed job offer at the end if they complete the program successfully. That would require significant company buy-in, I pointed out. Your leadership would need to commit resources, time, and money. I know, but I think I can sell it. We've been talking about veteran hiring for 2 years without actually doing anything meaningful. This would be real action with measurable outcomes. And if Maya would be willing to help, to share her story with our executive team, to explain what veterans need, I think I could get approval. I looked at Marcus, then at Chen. Both were watching me, waiting to see what I'd say. I'm a barista, Tyler. I'm not a corporate consultant or a veteran advocate. I'm just trying to live my life. But you're also Ghost 7-2, Marcus said gently. You're a Navy Cross recipient. You're someone who survived impossible odds and came home and rebuilt your life. That story matters. That expertise matters. And if sharing it could help other veterans, isn't that worth the discomfort? He was right, and I hated that he was right. I'd kept my service private because I wanted to just be Maya, not Maya the war hero. But maybe being Maya meant acknowledging all the parts of who I was, including the 6 years I'd spent as a Marine. Okay, I said, I'll help, but I'm not quitting my barista job. This is volunteer work, side project stuff. My mental health comes first. Absolutely, Tyler agreed. We do this on your terms, your schedule. I'm just grateful you're willing to help at all. Over the next 6 months, Tyler and I built something neither of us had expected. We met with his company's leadership and presented a comprehensive veteran hiring program. I told my story, answered their questions, explained the challenges and opportunities of hiring veterans. Chen provided data and best practices from his program. Marcus offered to help with veteran outreach. The company approved a pilot program, 10 positions over the first year with paid transition training and guaranteed offers for successful candidates. Tyler managed the corporate side, working with HR to adapt job descriptions, train managers, and create support systems. I worked with Chen's program to recruit candidates and help them prepare for the transition. It wasn't easy. The first candidate we placed struggled with the corporate environment and quit after 2 months. The second had a PTSD episode during a stressful deadline and needed time off. But the third, fourth, and fifth candidates thrived. They brought skills and perspectives that transformed their teams. They solved problems in ways their civilian colleagues never would have considered. By the end of the first year, Tyler's company had hired 12 veterans instead of the planned 10, and the retention rate was higher than their overall company average. Other companies started asking questions, wanting to know how they'd built their program. Tyler and I found ourselves speaking at conferences, writing articles, consulting with HR departments across the country. And through it all, I kept making coffee, because that was still where I needed to be, at least for now. The barista job was my anchor, my reminder that I was more than my service, more than my trauma, more than any single aspect of my identity. But what would finally make me consider leaving that coffee shop would come from an unexpected source, and the decision I made would honor both the Marine I'd been and the person I was becoming. 18 months after the barbecue, Tyler's company offered me a full-time position as their director of veteran initiatives. The salary was 3 times what I made as a barista. The role would involve building veteran hiring programs, supporting veteran employees, and consulting with other companies on best practices. I turned it down. "Why?" Tyler asked when I told him. "This is what you've been working toward. This is your chance to make veteran hiring your career." "Because it would consume my life," I explained, "and I'm not ready for that. Right now, I make coffee, I volunteer with the veteran program, and I have space in my life for therapy, for rest, for healing. If I took that job, it would become my whole identity again. I'd be the veteran advocate, the military expert, the person whose value comes from what I can do for others. And I just got to a place where my value comes from just being me." "I respect that," Tyler said, though I could see the disappointment in his face. "But the offer stands. If you ever change your mind, the position is yours." 2 years after the barbecue, I was making a latte when a young woman in Marine Corps gear walked into the coffee shop. She looked exhausted, overwhelmed, like she was barely holding it together. I recognized that look because I'd worn it myself. "First time back stateside?" I asked as I handed her the drink. She looked startled. "How did you know?" I showed her my wrist tattoo. "Force Recon, 3 deployments, been out for 8 years. Welcome home, Marine." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do this. Civilian life. I got out 2 weeks ago and everything feels wrong. Too quiet, too safe, too everything." "It gets easier," I told her. "Not quickly, but gradually. And there are people who can help, programs, support groups, other veterans who understand." I wrote down Chen's program information and my phone number. "Call if you need to talk, or if you just need to sit in silence with someone who gets it." She took the paper with shaking hands. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would understand. More people understand than you think. You just have to find them." After she left, I stood at the espresso machine thinking about paths and choices and identity. I was a barista. I was also a veteran, an advocate, a survivor. I was Ghost 72, and I was Maya Rodriguez. I was all of these things, and I was more than any of them. My cousin mocked me at a barbecue, thinking I was just a coffee maker, a failure, someone who'd wasted their potential. He didn't know about the 6 years I'd spent as a Force Reconnaissance Marine, the combat deployments, the Navy Cross, the call sign that honored both survival and sacrifice. His father, a Navy SEAL, saw my tattoo and knew immediately that I was more than Tyler's judgment. The humiliation Tyler felt when his ignorance was exposed taught him to never judge without understanding someone's full story. And the program we built together helped dozens of veterans find meaningful work and understanding employers. I still make coffee because that's what I need right now. But I'm also building something bigger, one veteran at a time, one conversation at a time. And that's enough. If Maya's story of hidden service and hard-won respect resonated with you, hit that like button. My favorite moment was when Uncle Marcus saw the call sign tattoo and immediately understood what it meant, showing the recognition that passes between warriors. "What was yours?" Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever been judged for your choices without people knowing your full story, remember that you don't owe anyone explanations. Your path is yours, and the right people will respect it. Subscribe for more stories about veterans, respect earned through service, and the journey from combat to peace.